On today's show, the Phoenix Suns trading for Kevin Durant. Just how good on paper are the Phoenix Suns with the addition of Kevin Durant? How good can the trio of Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant be in the Western Conference? Are they suddenly favorites to make it out of the West? How important was it for the Suns to not include Deandre Ayton in the trade for Kevin Durant? Plus, who projects to be the fifth starter alongside Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Deandre Ayton? All of that and more coming up right here at Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to different point scorers, three-pointers drained, who's going to win MVP, sixth man of the year, and even title odds. Right now, the title odds available on FanDuel. You got the Boston Celtics leading the way at plus 270, the Bucks at plus 410, the Phoenix Suns plus 500 after their acquisition of Kevin Durant, and rounding up the top five favorites, you have the Denver Nuggets at plus 750 and the LA Clippers at plus 1200. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Joining us now is Brendon, Kleen, the host of Locked On Suns. You can find wherever you listen to your podcasts and on YouTube. Just search Locked On Suns. Brendon, the Suns acquiring Kevin Durant at the NBA trade deadline, the biggest move in the entirety of the NBA this season. We're going to get into what this means for the Suns moving forward, but just looking at the trade itself, right? KD, TJ Warren for Bridges, Cam Johnson, Crowder, 4 firsts and a swap. Just unpack this trade for us. What do you think of the trade in and of itself for KD?
Suns fans had a little bit of prep for this, I think. So, look, I think the package, having talked through it and these teams having negotiated last summer when Durant initially made his trade request, I think Suns fans were expecting that it was going to take as much as it did. And so with that said, you just got to do it. This is the cost for getting a superstar player. And we knew the Suns needed some sort of probably pretty substantial upgrade. I mean, this is a team that even heading into last year's playoffs, there were questions. Was their offense good enough? Had they evolved and improved enough from losing the finals? That was answered pretty resoundingly against Dallas. And then you see this season, Chris Paul taking a step back due to his age. We'll see if that trend continues or maybe he can improve over the course of the season, but he didn't look anywhere near like you would want him to. And so you're looking at a team that already had questions getting even a little bit worse. New owner comes in. The team is ready to really pounce in a wide open Western Conference. And they get about the biggest possible upgrade that you could imagine in the form of a future Hall of Famer. One of 8 players who would be better than their current best player. So I think it is a no-brainer. It is a very big package, but it's kind of the cost of doing business in the NBA right now. And you look up at the standings, the Suns probably look at themselves as the favorite when it's all said and done. So for now, I don't think you worry about the package and the what they gave up. You just look at, is a championship going to happen? And you got to feel pretty good that could be a yes.
Health permitting, you just kind of mentioned they probably look at themselves as the favorites, but health permitting, and that's kind of the big question mark with guys like Chris Paul, Kevin Durant, Booker, who's even missed some time. I mean, how good is this Phoenix Suns team now after this acquisition?
I mean, they're amazing. I mean, they're going to fit together offensively. I'll say amazing on offense, right? I think you already look at the way the Suns played, running dribble handoff, running a lot of pick and roll, having different players operating and moving the ball and moving themselves all together in coordination. That's what the Suns have been, even with a guy like Devin Booker, even with a very controlling player like Chris Paul. They've been able to develop that type of identity. It's not quite the same thing. I'm not going to say it's the same as KD stepping onto a team with Draymond and Steph and Clay in terms of the cohesion. That team's at another level. that team's at another level with talent. But I think the fit and the evolution and the way that they just sort of make it work is going to be pretty similar. And so I think the offense you're talking about, really just not a lot of great options to try to contain them. I think defensively is where you will have some questions, but I also think we don't really know how the Suns are going to play. I think this team is going to have to change what it's looked like. If people remember how they played in years past with Jae Crowder at 6'6" being their power forward, it's not going to look like that anymore. They were a team that had Deandre Ayton dropping to the rim, trying to protect the basket, trying to force mid-range shots. Pretty traditional form of defense. Maybe they did some different things along the way, but they're going to be a little bit more versatile, a little bit more unique. They can switch more. They can have Durant as the rim protector and use Ayton's versatility to guard players like Giannis or whoever they might come up against more than they had in the past. So they'll look different on defense, which is the one sort of question and hesitancy that I have, along with the health, like you mentioned. But offensively, look, they're going to be pretty close to unguardable if they all stay healthy and fit as well as we assume they would.
You mentioned his name there a couple times. How important was it for the Suns to be able to, I feel like in so many of the trade hypotheticals we saw, DeAndre Ayton's name was constantly brought up as what would have been, maybe the centerpiece for a KD trade. How important was it for the Suns to be able to keep him and still add Kevin Durant? But also then, where should Suns fans' confidence level be at as far as Monty Williams' ability to kind of make this all work mid-season, right? They don't have a full offseason. They don't have a training camp to get these guys, chemistry levels up and working together and understanding how to be successful off of one another. You've got to do it on the fly mid-season.
Yeah. I think keeping Ayton was pretty fortuitous. I think if Suns fans, if this Suns front office got to pick, I think just because of what he's meant in the community, what he's meant in the locker room, what he's turned into and kept improving as a player, Mikal Bridges would still be on this roster today. But I do think if you're talking about doing it in season, in some ways, getting Ayton, keeping Ayton is the better path, because the best version would have been send Ayton out to Brooklyn, and then you do a separate Jae Crowder trade to get a big man. That kind of would have had to be the way, because the backup bigs on this Suns roster weren't going to cut it. You don't get what you want when you're dealing with trading for a superstar. So with that said, doing it in season and not having a great option to get another center, I do think this might pan out in terms of winning a championship this year, because Ayton will still be there to rebound, to protect the basket, to be that roll man in that pick and roll attack that I was just describing. And so that is lucky. That I think that will help them. I think on the side of Monty and pulling the right triggers and pushing the right buttons, he's a great coach. He's one of the better coaches in the NBA, I would say. If there's any limitation or problem that we've seen crop up, it's a quick trigger on adjustments in the playoffs, being proactive instead of reactive with let's try this, let's try that, based on the opponent, based on the matchup, based on the run that another team might be on, what's working, what's not over the course of a game. He's been outmaneuvered, I think, in that way at times. Maybe he hasn't had the best roster to do that, but he's really going to need to get creative, because you're not talking about a perfect 1 through 10 anymore. You're talking about a 1 through 4, and then night to night, it might be different who that 5 through 10 is. So we'll have to see who steps up and what Monty likes. They have enough pieces, I think, to make it work. You just got to see if you can make it all fit the right way. And I think that'll be the question for the last 20 or so games of the regular season, whenever KD gets back, and then based on whoever they match up with in the postseason.
And based on what you just said, you're fitting in those other guys around that 1 through 4, right? Paul, Booker, KD, Ayton, once everybody's healthy, once Durant's back, all of that. But who do you project to be the 5th starter when all 4 of those guys are healthy and on the court at the same time?
Look, I think at first it's going to be Torrey Craig. Like, he's been the guy all year who has started games. He's making 40% of his threes. There's a familiarity there. He's been on this team for 3 years. I think, crazily enough, NBA fans are going to need to get familiar with the name Josh Okogie. Like, he is probably not somebody people have thought too much about since he was drafted by Minnesota and then ended up on a minimum contract here in Phoenix. But he's basically the only one who can sort of replicate what Mikal Bridges did as a point of attack defender. Monty Williams started him in their weekend game over the weekend, and he was a 3. Starting three, defended, did his thing. He's a great offensive rebounder. He can do a lot of things. It could be Damian Lee, who's been close with Kevin Durant in the past. They play together in Golden State. I think the bottom line is the Suns have options. It's hard for me to say for sure who will start or who will close until we see it. But the good thing is a lot of these role players have had time throughout the season to actually play. They're not being asked to step up and do something brand new out of, the cotton mothballs in the closet. We'll see what it is, but I do think that it's probably the defining question of the rest of the season for the Suns is who that fifth guy is.
Are the Phoenix Suns now the favorites to make it out of the Western Conference with the addition of Kevin Durant? What will the trio of KD, Booker, and Chris Paul look like sharing the floor? Of course, you'll have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On Suns. Brendon, I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
All right. Thanks, Jackson. Anytime.